There are a ton of political podcasts on the internet. A lot of them lean to the left. A lot of them lean to the right. So predictable. But not this one, shooting you straight between the eyes with the truth. This is the Middle Ground Podcast. From Murfreesboro, Tennessee, for Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and Rutherford County, this is the Middle Ground Podcast, and this is Answer Fancher.
I am Answer Fancher, and this is the Middle Ground Podcast, and I'm glad you guys are here today to listen in. If you've tuned into the podcast for the first time, be sure to subscribe. If you're watching on Facebook or YouTube or any of the other social medias out there, be sure to give it a like. Be sure to share it with your friends. I sure would appreciate it. It helps grow the show, that's for sure. And what is this show about? This show is about Middle Tennessee. This is about the middle ground. This is about Rutherford County, Murfreesboro, Middle Tennessee, and beyond. But it all starts here in Murfreesboro, the center, the geographical center of the state. First up, we're talking about the school board. I mean, who's not talking about schools right now? Come on, we're in the middle of a pandemic, right? And the question is, do we send kids to school or do we not? A lot of people wrestling over that. We're going to talk about that. Miss Mariah Phillips has an opinion on it. She shared that with the county commission, and I'm going to share it with you guys. But first, I want to talk about how the school board is dealing with an issue. I think it's a great example of what happens at the school board meeting. If you've never been, good for you. No, I'm just kidding. You actually should pay attention to what's going on there. The largest part of the county budget is the schools itself. And so it's very, very important. And, Mr. Spurlock is up there trying to guide these guys along and get them to follow his lead. And sometimes that can be a little difficult for sure. So I've got a sample here I want to show you guys of one of the meetings. See if I can pull this up. Browser 2, there we go. And we're going to jump in at 125. So what I've done is you can go and watch. You don't even have to go to the meetings anymore. It's great. You can just watch on YouTube. It comes on live. Subscribe to Rutherford County. Or if you don't want to bother with that, you can just subscribe to my podcast, and I'll tell you when they do something interesting. I like paying attention to what's going on. So I watch a lot of county commission meetings, and I watch a lot of school board meetings. Of course, if you're serving on those, you got far more meetings than I care to keep up with. But I'm trying to hit the highlights for you guys and get this show done in 30 minutes. So let's jump in here to the middle of the school board meeting. Happened this past Thursday.
I guess the only other thing I would be curious about, if we were to consider something like this, those proceeds, what would we do with the money that come from that?
My guess.
Okay, so let me hop in. Let me tell you what's going on. There's a piece of property next to, I believe it is Wilson Elementary. It's about 5 acres away. There's, no way that you can add on to the school and use this land to build. The land that we purchased, the county purchased this piece of land from, the family has come forward and said, hey, we'd like to buy that piece back. We can see you guys aren't using it. We'd like to buy it. During the discussion that took place, we found out that they could possibly put 4 houses on there, maybe 3 or 4 houses. They'd have to have their own septic systems out there in the county. And so that's an option. And then we find out, one of the members there, he said, his name escapes me at this point, but he says, what is the real benefit to the school board selling this? And let's listen to that again here, shall we?
Yes, they'd go back to the county, because the county is the one who provided the funds. The money would go back to the county general.
So the money from this sale of this property that the school board doesn't need. They've already determined they don't need this. The sale of it, the money would go back to the county coffers, because every time the school board comes to the county commission with their hand out, they get something put in it, right? And because the county commission is almost, it has to do what the school board tells it to do, basically. I mean, it really does. This is why I ran for school board before, because the largest part of the county budget is the school system itself. And so it's really important. But in this case, they've got a chance to sell some property, and this is what they said.
They wouldn't actually come back to us for a building fund.
No, sir.
There's no real benefit for the school board to sell the property then.
There's no real benefit for the school board to sell the property. Yes, there is. If you're not using the land, that money goes back into the county coffers, right? But also this, let's say they do build 3 or 4 houses on there, right? Now, all of a sudden, we're increasing the tax base. That's more dollars to go into the schools to help educate our kids. It's a win-win. But instead, they're going to sit on this land and they're not going to sell it because they say they get no benefit from it. Well, you can count on that. I'm going to call my county commissioner up and I'm going to tell him that we need to look into that a little bit more and find out where the real benefit is for the school board. Let's jump to Miss Mariah Phillips, who came and spoke to the county commission about our schools. It's not easy having to produce your own shows. One of these days, maybe I'll be able to hire somebody.
Rutherford County.
Mariah was at 53 minutes into it.
Thank you. Merry Christmas and happy holidays to you. And thank you for allowing me time to speak today.
Can't hear it.
My name is Mariah Phillips. I live at 511 East Clark Boulevard, Murfreesboro. I'm a mother of an 8th grader, a former teacher with Rutherford County Schools, and a current businesswoman trying to juggle all of this, like all of you are, in the world of COVID. Today I'm asking for your help for your community. Help us be Rutherford responsible by moving our schools to virtual learning until we can get a handle on this virus. I know that this body does not make the choice to open or close the schools. That authority belongs to Bill Spurlock and the school board. But you do have the power of the purse and can encourage the Rutherford County school leaders to keep our community safe by keeping our school buildings closed. As the 4th largest school system in the state, Rutherford County has always been an attractive place for teachers to spend their careers. But our community response to COVID, specifically in our schools, has led to teachers leaving the field mid-year in record numbers. And it's hard to blame them. In the last week, we have seen 23 deaths in Rutherford County alone, including a teacher from Siegel High School recognized tonight. In 2020, a year with increased complexity, teachers didn't get their promised pay raises. And although teachers are accustomed to paying for classroom supplies out of their own pocket, the purchase of PPE for students and cleaning supplies for classrooms adds an extra burden this year. On one day last week, there were 56 sub-positions unfilled. That means 56 classrooms went unsupervised. In some classes, the classrooms were combined with other classrooms, making distance learning impossible. In other cases, older students, seniors in high school, were sent to freshman classes to supervise. Is that even legal? I'm concerned that we're going to have some lawsuits on our hands in the future if we don't get this under control. If keeping our schools open is for the academic success of our students, it's not working. ACT scores are lower than they have been in years. Long-term subs are taking over while teachers are on ventilators. Meanwhile, our governor continues to sit on millions of dollars of money earmarked for education in a rainy day fund. Virtual learning presents its own set of challenges, but this is the time we really are showing our priorities as a community. Our teachers cannot speak out because they are afraid of losing their jobs, and our parents feel helpless, like no one is listening. Closing our schools is not only the ethically and morally right thing to do, it is the financially responsible thing to do as well. Thank you so much. Help us be Rutherford responsible. Other counties have done it. We can too.
All right, so Mariah comes up and wants us to be Rutherford responsible. That's great, and I think that it's important that we are Rutherford responsible. And I believe that Rutherford Responsible means don't close your schools, right? I like the idea of this hybrid that they're working on, the idea of cutting down the number of students in the class so that way they can socially distance. We can still have kids in the classroom. They can still get some in-person instruction. They're going to have K through 5 in school. You know, here's the issue. Here's the real issue, in my opinion. If you close down the schools, you affect the economy. How do you affect the economy, Gabriel? You affect the economy because somebody's got to stay home with those kids. Someone has to stay home and teach them, right? Someone has to stay home and make sure they're on the computer and things of that nature. Who normally does that? Who normally takes care of the kid when they're sick? Well, in my house, we flip that back and forth. It depends on if I'm teaching or not, right? But in most houses, most of the time, it's the mother who has to take care of the kids. Now, that's not fair. That's not right. But that is how our society chooses to handle raising of children. It mostly falls upon the women. It did in my house growing up. It still happens. And here's how I know it. Here's how I've got proof. You can look at these numbers. We have a she session going on right now, right? Not a recession, a she session. And I can barely say it because I can barely stand it. Look, we've had more people fall back into poverty during this COVID-19 pandemic than we've had in a very long time. Like, it's far worse than 2008, in my opinion. Far, far worse. Because what you're seeing is you're seeing women lose their positions in the workforce. They've fallen back to a point where like women in the workforce are back to before 2008. They've lost 20 years of progress. And so for us to go and close schools down, biggest mistake we could possibly do, right? It just is. We know that kids aren't going to pass from this. In general, most of the time they aren't. Now, some teachers are. Some teachers are going to pass because they have lots of extra problems, right? And they're older. And look, maybe it's time for them to be doing the virtual teaching. That's what I would propose. If I was in charge, you take your older teachers, the ones that are susceptible to the virus, and you have them go teach. They can teach from home. They can set up something like what I have here, right? They can talk to this, and they could really focus on their students, their virtual students, and we could accomplish a lot that way. And that's how you deal with it, because you just can't you can't close the schools down. Some people need 2 jobs in their household to survive. They've built a life on the idea of 2 incomes. And if you close schools down, you are affecting that model. And you're going to change things for a long time. The damage you do to the economy lasts far longer than people realize. And so it's important that we don't close our schools down. So important. And the county commission, they're not in charge of it, but they could lean on the school board and get them to make some decisions and stuff. I hope they don't. I like the ideas that they have about the hybrid system. I would do it a little differently, but hey, I'm not in charge, right? And so I'm just here to tell you guys about what's going on. I do appreciate Mariah Phillips coming to the county commission and talking. I think it's great that we get lots of ideas there. I'm about to share with you a little bit more that happened at the county commission. We could use more people like Mariah on the county commission. We need good people that are willing to take on tough issues, willing to talk about tough issues, and like I said earlier, willing to talk about the elephant in the room. So let's get to that, shall we? You want to talk about an elephant in the room? Pull that up. Make sure I'm starting at the right spot.
We do our financial business, and that is the recent campaign audits that came out about Mayor Ketron's campaign funds. Now, I brought this up and asked some questions about a year and a half ago. People didn't take it seriously. They, said things about me behind my back and this and that, and that's all fine. But it turns out that the concerns were founded. And
all right, so let's give you a little backstory on that. That's Robert Stevens that's speaking there, and he is a county commissioner from up in the Smyrna area. He's had a bit of a run-in with the mayor because he was a big proponent, Robert was, of not having the mayor run the county commissioner as its chairman. And I agree with Robert on this issue. So the county commission is like our legislative branch. Can you imagine Donald Trump being the Speaker of the House? That's what we have going on here in Rutherford County. We have the mayor running the county commission, and so therefore he's basically running two branches of the government. Now, he won't say it that he's running it, and the county commissioners won't say that he's running it. You're going to see that in a minute. But the fact of the matter is he runs the meeting. And they follow Robert's rule. They're supposed to follow Robert's rules of orders in there. You're going to see that they don't, and therefore the meetings aren't being run the way they should be run. And so even if he didn't have these this smoke, these allegations of losing money or misusing money or who knows what, right? Even if the mayor didn't have those, I don't think he should be running these county commission meetings. So here, let's listen to Robert speak a little bit more.
And in fact, I have copies of the audit here, and the overarching concern in there is that $240,000 approximately is unaccounted for. Now that is not something that we need to be associated with as a commission.
Speaking of spending a lot of money, they spend all kinds of money on those microphones in there. And for some reason, Robert Stevens, the guy who's got a problem with the mayor, gets the microphone that makes this awful racket all the time.
I don't know how anybody could look at this and not see any red flags with it. I trust that you've all sought out the audit and read through all 120 some odd pages of it. It was much worse than I ever imagined it would be. But we need to remove ourselves from this cloud that's hanging over us with these financial issues. So in a minute, I'm going to make a motion that we ask Mayor Ketron to step down as chairman of this commission until those issues are resolved favorably, or until we get an explanation to all the questions that have been raised from the issues presented in the audit. Now, I don't know if anybody will second that or not. I tried to do this about a year ago, and everybody looked down at the table when I made the motion. Nobody had the courage to second it, I suppose, and I don't know that anybody will do that tonight. But what that's going to tell the public is it's a 19-1 vote. 19 are okay with what they see, and 1 is not. Our taxpayers need to know that everything here is being done above board, and until this cloud is lifted from us, our integrity and our motives are being questioned out there in the public. I don't see how anybody could disagree otherwise. Now, if you'll turn a blind eye to these things, what else will this commission turn a blind eye to? I mean, this is a very serious matter. If you had a financial advisor that was in a situation where $240,000 from people's accounts was missing, would you keep that person as your financial advisor? Well, of course you wouldn't. You'd probably move your money somewhere else. If you were on a bank board and your CEO was in a situation to where $240,000 was missing and unaccounted for, what would you do? Well, the bank board probably would not just put their head in the sand and ignore the issue. They would do something about it. And they would have done something about it very quickly, not a year and a half later. So why is this different?
Well, Robert, why is it different? It's different because it's Tennessee politics. We're one of the worst states for corruption. And part of the reason is that we have such lax laws on raising campaign finance money. So when you go to run for office and you file your campaign financing forms, all you have to do is just write down the stuff on. It's like one sheet of paper, unless you raise a bunch of money, like Mayor Ketron has, right? And then you write down anytime it's $100 or more, you got to write it down. But there's no checks and balances on that. You submit that, and that's it, right? And so what if you said you collected money and didn't collect it? What's the penalty for that? You guys hear those crickets? So there is no penalty for it, right? But why would someone do that, Gabriel? Why would someone write down some money and say they have money when they don't have money? Well, when you go to run for office, the first thing you do is you figure out who you're going to have to run against. And when you figure out who you're going to run against, you go, well, how much money do they have in the bank? And if you're filing forms saying you have hundreds of thousands of dollars in the bank, do you think people want to run against you? No, it builds a moat around you. It protects you. And so it's possible this money was not stolen. It's very possible. And if it wasn't stolen, that means it wasn't collected. And if it wasn't collected, you got to wonder why. Let's see what else Robert has to say.
Why would we not try to do something different here to show our taxpayers that we're distancing ourselves from these concerns? I don't see how anybody could argue against doing something different. Now, one more thing, and I want to say this as nicely as I can, but it is time for this commission to wake up from the status quo slumber mindset that you have, and we need to do something. We need to address this concern. People out there have valid concerns, and they need to be addressed. They've been ignored for a year and a half. What's it going to take for us to do this, to address it? I just don't understand what else it's going to take to get people to see that there's some concerns here.
Well, I'm wondering what it's going to take, too. You know, the county commission was super, super slow to act on Robert Arnold, right? They didn't want to remove him either. And so there were people that came together, raised money, and sued sued the county and things of that nature to try to get the right thing done. And evidently that's what we're going to have to do here now, by the looks of it, is because the county commission isn't willing to do their own job. Poor Robert standing up there all by himself. Let's hear what else he has to say.
This is amazing. And on behalf of everybody in this county who's tired of political corruption in Rutherford County, I rebuke this board for just failure to act, failure to ask questions, failure to exercise oversight on this situation. There hasn't been anything. And in fact, the person that's asked the questions has been ostracized and persecuted and talked bad about behind my back. And that's fine. I'm sure that's going to happen tonight. That's been the status quo go-to tactic for 10 years. When people ask tough questions or things that they don't want brought up, they'll personally attack you, and they'll try to bully and try to intimidate you and all these things. And that's fine. It hasn't worked for me in the past 10 years. It's not going to work tonight. But if you don't have a factual or logical response to these questions, you need to do something about it. Your gut instinct that tells you this is bad is right. This is a problem. If you disagree with me, I want to ask you one thing. I want you to look into that camera tonight and tell your constituents that in that 120-page report, there is nothing in there that people should be concerned about.
Look, man, all those county commissioners, they know nobody's watching. They've seen these YouTube numbers. We pay like tons and tons of money to get this stuff on YouTube. And I'm glad they do, because I don't have to leave the house to keep up with what the shenanigans are going on over there. But listen, nobody's watching, nobody's paying attention, and they know that. They know it.
There's nothing in there that's actionable. Nothing else is going to come of this. It's all just going to go away. If you can do that and tell your constituents that, I really want to know what you have to say, because if I'm missing something, I really want to understand what it is. But if you can't do that and look into that camera and tell your constituents that there is nothing here to be concerned about, then you're essentially admitting that what I'm saying is correct. It's time for this board to act. It's time for us to address this issue. It keeps unfolding, and it's time for us to do something about it tonight. So with that, I want to make a motion that Mayor Ketron step aside from the county commission. And I don't know if it'll get a second or not, and if it doesn't, that's fine, but at least the topic was addressed. And I will be the first one to commit. If this turns out favorably for him, or we get a good explanation of the issues that were presented, I will commit to make a motion to bring him back as our chairman. But until that time, we have got to distance ourselves from these issues, because people are questioning our integrity and our motives, and I don't want to be associated with that. So I make a motion that we ask Mayor Ketron to step aside until these issues are resolved.
All right, so he's made a motion for him to step aside until these issues are resolved. I would be like, I don't think you should be running this branch of government, so please step aside. And oh, by the way, take care of those other issues, right? But, I mean, it's $250,000. No big deal, right? But I'm about to show you why he should not be running the meeting.
Commissioner Stevens.
Hold up. There is a motion on the floor. If you're running the meeting, you know what you should be saying? You should be like, there's a motion. Do I have a second? Seeing no second, we'll just move on. That's what he should do. That's not what he does.
I shared with you a year and a half ago that I felt that your ego was larger than your mental and your physical capabilities,
I think that's a veiled threat.
as they are here tonight. If you were as smart as what you say you are, and you stand up and get your Ruthie Award,
Does it really matter if he got a Ruthie Award or not?
you would have listened to that news story last week on Channel 5, because at the end of that story, it said those were strictly findings. Those findings, the registry took no action on. They deferred until April. So those receipts, all of that information that you're saying it was dishonest, there's still an opportunity to go before in a show cause hearing in April.
So I think, in my opinion, I don't know if Robert said it was dishonest. He said there was some smoke there, basically, right? He's saying that there's some issues, some questions that need to be answered that aren't being answered. Mayor Ketron just said that those questions will be answered in April, right? That's what I gathered there. But he's not answering them right now.
So I think you're out of order. And I'm not.
Is he out of order? I don't think he's out of order. I think what's out of order here is that Mayor Ketron is upset with him for making that statement, making that, show, and then pushing forward this motion. I think he's upset about that. But the chairman's job is not to get heated over something that is put forward like that.
I'm going to step down. We'll move on.
So there's a motion on the floor. He says, I'm not going to step down. Let's move on. That's not calling for a second. That's not seeing what the rest of the body thinks.
Chairman, as new commissioner, I don't think I've been around long enough to be a part of the status quo. You and I personally had a phone conversation where I said to you in the very beginning, I had my doubts about you.
All right, so they're having conversations privately. Are you supposed to do that when you're an elected official?
You remember that?
I do.
Evidently it did happen because Mayor Ketron remembers it.
Those doubts, some are still there just because of what Commissioner Stevens has talked about, but I don't see how that has to
This is
do
Michael
with
Rather
you chairing this commission. You don't run the county. We do.
He's the chairman of that commission. He runs the meetings.
Unless I'm mistaken.
You're correct.
So we still make the decisions.
With all due respect, Mr. Rather, you are incorrect.
But you've done a good job. In my mind, you've done a great job as chairman. Now, you and I have talked about those issues, not out in front of the public, one-on-one, man-to-man. We've talked about it.
What other issues have you talked about? Have you talked about other county issues?
All of it, from the insurance company all the way through. When that is, I don't see, I had a financial advisor one time. Never thought I'd have one, but I ended up having one. That financial advisor owned his own business. And if money was missing, yes, I'd fire that guy in a heartbeat and find somebody else. But we have checks and balances. I trust that lady sitting to the chairman's left, not you, Nick, further to the left. She has won, her department and her have won award after award after award, year after year after year. There's checks and balances. He doesn't handle all the money of this county. So I'm not that much concerned about that. To me, it's a personal thing that he needs to deal with. And in April, when the hearings take place, and right now, we've all heard this. We look at the news, we read the newspaper about the pandemic.
I'm going to stop this right here because Mr. Rather I would just think that he'd probably rather me do that. Let's see what who speaks next.
I've been up here 22 years, and I'm not skirting anything. We had a sheriff that we had a problem with. We worked through that on the ethics committee. We've had commissioners in the past that we've had problems with. And one thing that I found out, and you'll all find out, is none of us sitting in this room have the power to push anybody out of office that's an elected official. That's the bottom line right there. Now, yes, we can say, hey, we don't want you to be our chairman anymore, but that's not the issue that we're talking about here. We cannot remove anybody from office, and I want to make that very clear. You do not, as a county commissioner, have that power, period. Thank you.
And he's right. They don't have that power, right? It takes a few more things. It's very hard to remove someone from office in Tennessee. That's why we lead in corruption. Like, you can get arrested and still hold your elected office. It's crazy. But anyway, that's that. So they are trying to figure out what to do next. If you're not...
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a comment, please.
You recognize Ms. Allen?
Thank you. I seconded the motion primarily so we could have discussion. I agree that we do not know conclusively what all the facts are here. The news report is not flattering. There has been ample opportunity, it seems like, that if justification or explanations can be made, that they would already be made public. But I'm not in any rush to judgment in this situation either. But I didn't want Commissioner Stevens to walk this road alone. I want the public to know that we are all concerned, but there is a time and an order and a process for this.
And she's right. There is a time, a place, an order for it. I think that it's important that we just realize that the mayor has a mayor's job. The mayor he's in charge of a lot of employees. He's in charge of a lot of issues, but he's in the way we've been doing our county government. Not the way we're required to do it, but the way we've been doing it is we put the mayor in charge of the county commission, and so he runs one more thing. And I just don't think that's right. I really don't. I think that he ought to be being in the mayor's office alone. We wouldn't want Donald Trump running the House of Representatives. We wouldn't want Donald Trump running the Senate. And so therefore, I don't see why we put the mayor in the county commission. They go on and vote here in just a little bit. There's 2 votes to ask him to step down. Those being Rhonda Allen and Robert Stevens. Thank you guys for those votes. If I could encourage all the other county commissioners to really think about this and to see themselves as the legislative body for the county, and to really just think about how the government is intended to run. Would you want Donald Trump running the House of Representatives? I guarantee most of them would say, well, there's some hardcore Republicans on there. Craig Harris probably would want Trump in there and not Nancy Pelosi, be my guess. But anyway, that's what I'm saying. So I think that what we need to do is, if you have a county commissioner, and you do if you live in Rutherford County, you need to contact your county commissioner. You need to tell them that you think that we ought to select someone else to run that committee for sure. And if you happen to know Rhonda Allen, or if you know Robert Stevens, and if you agree with me that they should vote to remove Mayor Ketchum from that position, then be sure to tell them thank you. And thank you very much for watching. Thank you for tuning in. I love all of you guys. I do. Every one of you. I love you. Thank you. You're the reason I do this. I hope you learned something by tuning in, and I hope that we can meet up again soon. And thank you again for tuning in. Be sure to like the show. Be sure to share it. Be sure to tell people about it. It all helps. Thank you so much.
You've been listening to the Middle Ground Podcast, hosted by Answer Fancher. Finally, a political podcast that isn't left or right. It's right down the middle. Make sure to like, rate, and review, and tell a friend or two. That would help also. Coming to you from Middle Tennessee with a political view right down the middle. You've been listening to the Middle Ground Podcast. See you soon.